I didn't. Okay. Hi guys. So welcome to our dialogue and deliberation. Since our topic is super nuanced and complicated, we decided we were going to do kind of like a talk show style dialogue, which you could call a roundtable discussion of the various issues and challenges. So in our adorable little group, we have Lindsay Kraft, who's going to wave adorably, and then we have Kristen Taylor. I'm going in the order of my screen. I don't know what everyone else can see. And then I have Jess Horton, also Culver, but she's Jess Horton now. I was there. It happened.
It did.
And so we're going to talk about the ongoing and ever-changing eviction and housing moratoriums. So essentially, the CDC last year sometime, somebody shout out what month the first one was. July?
July.
Great. Okay, July 2020. The CDC was like, you shouldn't evict people because it's a social distancing crisis. This all started because we didn't want homelessness to spike in the face of everything shutting down and people being laid off, and then Rona going out of control. Because you can't social distance when you're homeless and you're all sleeping in piles and tents and stuff like that. So that's where this originated. However, that got extended and 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 extended. And now we're here in November of 2021. What's up? And that rental crisis has compounded. So one of the major things that we looked at is the fact that people haven't paid their rent in a long time. So people are owing anywhere from, like, on the lower end of the spectrum, $10,000 to the higher end of the spectrum, $40,000 to $50,000, depending on what their rent costs are in their various regions. And that back rent, even if they couldn't get evicted, is still compounding on itself. So that crushing debt is looming over the heads of, one of the stats we found was 11 million Americans are facing eviction. Does anybody want to bring anything up on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that this has always been a problem. I think there's always been a housing crisis. There's always been people with housing instability. People have always been on the cusp of eviction. I think that the coronavirus pandemic has just kind of brought this to light. The inability of landlords to evict people and the compounding rents and everything like that has just kind of made it more of a problem. So this has just become kind of like a check mark on our housing problem in America.
Absolutely. The other piece of this is, earlier in our talk before we started recording, Lindsay brought up, what was it, 72.4%?
Yeah, 72.4% of landlords are individuals, are smaller, like Jess's dad. Jess was sharing that, her father's a landlord. So these are not proportionate to our large corporations that might have the money to not get paid for months on end for multiple properties. So we're really kind of in a catch-22. Both sides really are suffering. And so kind of what do we do, and what is the discussion points around it?
So
both sides are definitely suffering. It's just totally different kind of ways. And I think you can, like I was saying earlier before we started recording, I see both sides of, kind of the debate and the argument of, who needs to have more help and what we need to focus on, because I've seen how it affects. I have clients that rent. I have close friends and family that rent. And then I also see how it affects, at the end of the day, my dad and how he survives every day.
Yeah, I think like Courtney was saying, like landlords might be $80,000 in the hole not having rent, but on the other side of it, with the loss of jobs and the loss of being able to work, a lot of people might be only being able to pay $100, $200 a month. So they might be doing the best that they can, but just need essential housing. So, where can we meet in the middle? So like Lindsay was saying earlier, like, how do we solve this housing problem?
Well, and I don't think we can solve it overnight. But one of the frustrations that we had sort of mentioned was there is the Biden administration sort of in a hurry created a $47 billion emergency rental assistance program. But the biggest like challenge, according to the New York Times, was that the federal to state connection points were just kind of not working, which happens kind of across the board. Like anytime the federal government has been like, here's the money, do with it what you want.
They decide to sit on it, and that seems to be what they want to do.
It doesn't always get to the people. And we've seen that with our conversations about Katrina. We've seen that all of us are kind of peripherally involved in child welfare. So Lord, we know about 4E money. And how that never seems to get where it needs to be. Like all of those channels break down. And we were also talking about how it's relatively easy. Jess, you were saying it's pretty easy to navigate, just people don't know about it.
It is. It's a really, actually, from at least, in the state of West Virginia, I've had people that are friends, I've had clients that I always get a little pushback when I mentioned it the first few times, because they thought they'd have to supply a lot of information and there'd be a lot of hoops to jump through. And really, it's been very easy once they apply. It's a very fast approval process. And then even, like I said, my dad, he says, sometimes my other worry was that even when somebody gets approved and they say, oh, the funds are coming, landlords don't always get those funds as quickly as you might think. It may be approved, it may be sitting somewhere, but it's not getting where it needs to be for 30, 60, 90 days. But it's been something that it's been a very quick turnaround for my dad as well. So it's there, and it's a fairly easy process from what I've seen, and it gets, it goes through fast. It's just a lot of hesitation because a lot of programs aren't as easy, and people don't automatically think they don't qualify, or they don't, think they have what they need to do it. But I've recommended to everybody, if you rent, you should go ahead and apply for it, because it's extra help. Because I think everybody with COVID had some sort of hurt to their income, be it, related with like not being able to work or a reduction in hours. It changed how a lot of people did work. Even us in child welfare, it changed how we did things. So it's hurt a lot of people, and I think the programs are there for a lot of people. They just don't know about them.
I think one of the other challenges that I've noticed with access is my clients think that it's the same thing as West Virginia Works funds or like emergency, and they're like, well,
they don't know where it
comes
qualify
from because I've already gotten my electric bill paid for it. I'm like, no, it's different. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And
they just lump it all in.
Yeah. And so they're like, well, I'm not going to qualify because I had my electric bill paid for 2 years ago or something like that. And it's like, no, it's a different pot of money. It's a different program. And I think
it's something totally different. Yeah.
The media has done a really poor job at like letting people know that it's available, because the media likes to focus on the bad and not on the aid, which is like a topic for another deliberation.
I know that, like we had talked about, each state is having is kind of creating their own policies around this. And I know that in Philadelphia, landlords must apply for the rental assistance and go through that mediation before they're able to file for an eviction. So I think that, one, it helps keep evictions off tenants' records, and then also kind of forces people and landlords to use the funds that have been allocated. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I think there's space too for like payment plans. Like, when you default on a car payment, you can call the creditor, and maybe instead of like $200, you pay like $250 for so many months to make up for what you what you missed before they repossess your vehicle. Like, I wonder if there's a way for these funds to sort of like front the money, if you will, or at least like put a Band-Aid on it so that it can heal, and people and I do think that for a lot of people, especially for self-esteem wise, being able to pay it back on your own is a really big deal. But like, $10,000 is terrifying. But if
Well,
I'm
and I think,
adding
yeah.
$50 a month or whatever, and like the federal government can compensate, or that money can be used to match, it could help people feel more willing to like
Because at
lean
a
into
certain
that.
point, you feel like you're so deep in, you just want to throw your hands up.
Right, but
Yeah.
it's like,
I
I know I'm going to be
also-
homeless.
I want to acknowledge that there's a deep mistrust of this system as
True.
well. You know, a lot of people don't want to put their social security number. A lot of people
That's a
don't
great
want to
point.
put their address and phone number on there because there is a deep mistrust of government help.
Yes.
The system is so broken, and this system has hurt a lot of people, and so
Yeah.
there's that working against
Well, and we were
us as
talking
well.
earlier about like the difference between urban and rural populations. So like in a big city like Pittsburgh, or even when I was living in Boston, you know, when we think of homelessness, we think of like people on the streets, right? But like I live in rural West Virginia, and you know, if half the properties on the mountain I live on are rentals, and a lot of them are, those are one, landlords who may own 3 or 4 different properties. Like my landlord, he owns like 5 or 6 different properties, and his wife's a school teacher, right? Like I know that a couple of tenants not paying rent, it's gonna hurt. They got 4 kids. So you know, the rural homelessness, what, like, it looks different. If you think about like the percentage of people who rent, if it's as high as it is kind of universally, if we have rural homelessness, that takes on a totally different picture. We're talking encampments, we're talking people living behind Walmarts, people like it creates a different kind of public health crisis and a different kind of challenge than it does in the city, where people can huddle together in an alley or next to a steam pipe or in a park or something. We don't have that even for like bare minimum shelter out in the middle of nowhere, which is an even bigger crisis. And because there's so few resources, it's not like there's Section 8 housing, right?
Yeah.
Like this is where we're at in rural America. So you've got landlords struggling, you've got no alternatives, there aren't shelters, there is no infrastructure to handle this problem. And so
there's no infrastructure regardless, whether I think
right.
you're rural or city. And when we look at the disparities to our minority population, you know, there's a statistic here that from March 15th of 2020 through the week of June 27th, 2021. Now, mind you, that was in the middle of the moratorium. So while landlords could still file for an eviction, the evictions weren't going through. So I would have to say that I would think that some of this number is pretty low, because landlords knew that they weren't going to file if it wasn't going to go anywhere. But there were over 351,000 eviction filings, and 24% of those were from Black neighborhoods. You know, so I think that when you really look at, so it says, while Black majority neighborhoods hold 10% of these cities and states' populations, they accounted for 24% of eviction filings. We know that our, you know, minority populations are targeted unfairly already. And so when you're looking at that 11 million people that could be without a home, how much of that number are already marginalized populations?
Well, and how hard is it for minority populations to purchase a home? So they can't purchase a home because of red tape, and
then they're going to have an eviction on there.
And now they're going to have an eviction because of a pandemic that's affected everybody, but because they are minorities and disproportionately oppressed by a system, now they have this extra struggle. And I think that
the eviction's going to make it harder for them to find a job
or a new home.
And so, I mean, just barring them from having a job, that's going to make it difficult for everything else on top of it.
It's for real a challenge.
Well, anything else on this? I mean, I know we can't solve this in a day, but
frustrating though.
Yeah.
Well, in our research and stuff, Kristen, you brought up the Colorado eviction moratorium. Did you want to touch on that a little bit as like a case study?
Did I want to talk on the
Maybe.
Colorado? Was it me?
Was it you, or was it somebody else who put that in the slideshow?
It's not me.
I don't know.
It's just the
The
thought.
Colorado, what about it?
Did Colorado do something special?
No.
Oh, okay. I just didn't
Was
know
it just
if it was
Colorado that you chose?
Yeah, it was just like a spotlight on Colorado. Just
okay.
how the
'cause I know-
landlord.
It was just an example.
It was
I
just
know when I was doing my own research, Colorado came up a lot as like a kind of a dualistic, both big city and small town
yeah.
kind of case study, because like especially in like Colorado Springs, you get like a weird marriage of both, and it's such a fascinating economic kind of point. So this is my shameless plug to watch the video because it'll explain it better than I can. But
Good video.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that we had sort of mentioned was also the so there's a bunch of different experts, right, that had a whole lot of opinions, from public health issue to the landlords don't have the money. And so with the one of the other economic theory, because really what we're doing is we're smashing together economics and public health. Like this is a topic that is the intersection of these two challenges. And so one of the biggest sort of conflicts here is the stability of the economy versus the public health and well-being of people. And it's such a dichotomy, because if public health means that the economy collapses, then the public health is going to collapse too. But if public health collapses, and the economy is going to collapse anyway, right? So like it's one of those really kind of nuanced situations, because people were saying if people are evicted, they're going to be around each other and we're going to spread Rona and we're all going to die, essentially. But then you have all of these top economists, there we go, trying to explain that like we cannot allow the dam to break. So if we're gonna start to repeal these things and like really push this aid, we need to push the aid first, get the money flowing into the economy, and a little bit by a little bit, like starting from like if you haven't paid for March of last year, okay, now we can have a conversation about you being evicted, so that the floodgates don't open, because it will break the system. And the question is, in this, and none of us can answer this, but the question is, in this polarized political climate, because the decision has been made that this needs to pass Congress and Senate, will a divided House make the right economic decisions, or is politics gonna break the economy? Like that's really the biggest issue here.
Because all those things are true, right? Coronavirus is still like an epidemic that's threatening to all of our community, right? We have an extreme housing shortage, and landlords need their money. All of those truths are, evident. However, we can't just let 11,000 or 11 million people become homeless all at one time. We need some sort of safety net, some social safety net. But how is that going to work, right? Because it needs to be like a staggering effect, or we need some sort of, what's going to happen to them.
I mean, it's not like we can just forgive it, because if we just forgive it, then all the landlords are still in the hole.
Other people aren't forgiving it, yeah.
Right, and like the landlord's supposed to pay their mortgage and their taxes and their property taxes and all that good stuff. Like
the house doesn't become free just because nobody's paying for it.
Exactly.
And where are they going to go?
Where are they going to go? I think that's my, where are they going to go? All of these, medically fragile and children and elder, like mentally ill, like where are they going to go? And I think that as social workers, we really need to, that's why I get frustrated. Like I don't have the answer, right? But I don't think any of us do. But when you really think about the fact that even if we say 5 million people are going to be out on the streets in the winter, by the way, with I can't even imagine, the ripple effect within all of our systems, and
it's gonna be
I can't even imagine.
catastrophic.
In my town,
Like I'm having agita a little bit, like really thinking about it.
We have stopped taking in-person students at our university, our local university, because we can't house our students. So that should tell you the housing problem that we have here. We've started putting up our clients at hotels that have previously been condemned. So that is our housing crisis where we live. So if those people become evicted because they have mental health problems, which they do, they're going to be on the streets. That's where they are. So when that eviction moratorium, like those evictions just start coming and coming and coming and coming, and my tiny little mountain, tiny town that has 3 grocery stores in it, there are going to be thousands of homeless people.
But $1,200 for a 1-bedroom apartment, right? When you're
That's
living
right.
in an area where, it's not West Virginia or one of our smaller areas in Pennsylvania where you might be able to get a 2-3 bedroom for $1,300. What about in Seattle, New York City, like some of these other, it's, yeah.
But then it's such a ripple effect, right? So we have 11 million renters who are going to be homeless. And then you have the landlords the small town landlords who are foreclosing on mortgages, who are, behind on their car payments and having their cars repossessed, and now they don't have transportation, who are behind on their utilities, who are behind on all these other things. And that's a serious concern. So then if those people aren't getting paid, like the ripple effect in the economy of this deficit is crushing. It's crushing across, and I think that's what we've all sort of said, is it's crushing across systems. And so is there a side? Is there a debate here? Not exactly. It's a complex,
Not exactly,
multifaceted problem. I mean, the moratoriums aren't
and I'm going to get some
right?
And I'm going to get some heat from saying this, and we could end this or keep talking about it, but landlords have assets. When we're talking about these individuals that are going to be put on the streets, they don't have anything. And so while I am not advocating, at all for landlords to have to sell their properties, and after years and years and years of all their blood, sweat, and tears and all of their hard work and devotion, I guess I just don't know the answer in that, how do you weigh one person's needs more than another? And I don't think that that's a fair thing to do. But I can already hear the argument from some people saying, well, landlords at least have those assets that they could sell, or that they could get another loan. I don't know. I'm not a homeowner, clearly, so I don't know. But I'm wondering what that conversation is going to look like.
Well, and I think it's easy to say that about some populations, but again, it's not always the case, because they haven't been getting paid for the last 18 months either.
That's
so
right.
If they're not getting paid, like, they're at risk, or have gone back on their
and their family,
and their families are struggling. And so, like, it's such a compounded problem that I don't know that any of the experts have a full picture of what this impact is going to be. And we could say hypothetically they could sell their properties, but if those properties are paying for
the value
themselves,
right?
Then the amount of debt, like, they're going to have to declare bankruptcy, like, and like the ripple effect of the economy, because economics is all kind of leveled on itself. And so, like, when the bottom starts to collapse, the whole thing's going to go.
Yep.
Jess, has your dad offered anything? Like, has he kind of spoken with you a little bit about what would happen, or what, because this affects you on a very personal level, because this is your family, right? Like, this is your father's livelihood and stuff. Like, how?
The first thing is that The market, he actually a couple years ago decided he wanted to sell. He has about like 9 units, like I said, and they're located in Raleigh County and in Kanawha County, and we live in Chesapeake, Ohio. And he kind of wanted to get away from the Raleigh County one just because it's so far away, and he has some health issues at this point and stuff. He's tried to actually sell those 4 units in Raleigh County, and the market for those he would have to take a substantial loss because people aren't in the market right now to have renters when they're not sure they'll be able to pay. Nobody's
That's a
willing to
great
pay for that. It it's a scary thing for me. I've tried to keep it on my mind a lot because it would affect me a whole lot. Actually, my house that I live in is the collateral for that is his Charleston apartments. So if something happens to the apartments in Kanawha County, the bank's going to also come after me in my house. So it's like it's an extra thing, because the banks at the end of the day, they don't get me started on banks. But banks at the end of the day, they don't care that there's a pandemic. They don't care that there's a crisis in their communities. They see finances, and that's what matters most, unfortunately. So that's why I even said, my dad, he's a parent, he's a grandparent, he's a kind person. So he's not been one of those people that wanted to, put people out and just look for reasons. He's never been that person. So it's kind of been difficult for him to draw that line in the sand because at the end of the day, he has a mortgage too. We have to keep everything kind of taken care of and up, and it's a stressful thing for him because he has done work. He was injured in the coal mines. He spent 20 some years in the coal mines before an accident happened. So he kind of turned this into his survival mechanism. So if he loses that, I don't really know what happens in that situation.
I think that's the question that a lot of Americans are facing.
Mm-hmm.
Is what happens. And
yeah,
I don't know, but I think we can all agree that what's being done is not sufficient, and more concrete solutions need to be proposed. And like I said, I don't know if it's within the scope of this project for us to solve this crisis, but I think we've done a pretty good job at least exploring the holistic and multi-system complexities of what is presented in the data and in the impending doom of this crisis. So thank you guys for your super hard work, and I hope that our listeners enjoyed our babblings about impending doom. Thank you for coming to our collective TED Talk.